I want to ask you to, if you can, to look into the future in terms of where the situation is right now, because obviously there's continuing persistent high unemployment throughout the country, but especially in the African American Latino communities, and increasingly as local governments are reducing their workforces, trying to cut pension benefits, certainly for African Americans, and not so much perhaps for Latinos and for Asian Americans. Government employment has been a huge conveyor belt for many African Americans to rise into the middle class, working in local and state governments and in the federal government. Your sense of what this portends for the future of the wealth gap if these current trends continue?
I think the prospects, at least for the next decade or two, are fairly grim. You're quite correct. African Americans have higher percentages in the government sector than in the private sector, or relatively compared to the general population. And these have been important avenues of opportunity that the recession is hitting heavily, and that will cut into the employment and income of many workers, and many of them disproportionately black. These do have accumulating effects. Clearly, people who suffer job losses or have family members or relatives who do often start drawing down on savings and on whatever assets they can convert to maintain to pay their bills and keep going until hopefully they can regain employment. This has no doubt contributed a much smaller proportion than the housing problems to some of the decline in the net worth of black and Hispanic families who
what would be the single most effective way to reverse this trend, Roderick Harrison?
It's going to be very difficult. We've started out by noting that the major cause of this is the collapse in home values and home equity, which is the primary and in many cases the sole source of wealth for most families, and especially for black and Hispanic families. We're seeing a very slow recovery in employment. So the unemployment problems, the underemployment, the discouraged worker percentages will continue to persist for some years to come. And the housing market shows very few signs of recovery, and one would think that it's going to take 5 to 10 years at least before housing values recover. And the neighborhoods that were hit the hardest with foreclosures and were lower housing values to begin with, black and Hispanic neighborhoods, lower income neighborhoods, are almost certainly going to be the last to recover in the housing market. So you've had this massive drop, 2/3, 1/2 drop in net worth, black, Hispanic, Asian populations. I don't see this recovering for the next 10 years or so. I don't see them, if they can recoup, if they can get back to the net worth levels that they were in 2005, within the next 10 years, I would be surprised.
Roderick Harrison,
now,
we want to thank you very much for being with us. You just said now, so last point.
People use net worth or draw on net worth to invest in their children's education, to help with perhaps a first home, a down payment for a first home. We're entering a period now where black and Hispanic families, 1/3 of whom have no net worth at all or negative net worth, won't be able to help their children in this way. So this is going to definitely play into the next generation.
Roderick Harrison, Associate Professor of Sociology at Howard University, former Chief of Racial Statistics at the Census Bureau.